7-year-old Janet asked her mother, "Where did I come from?" Her mother took a deep breath, held her daughter close, and gave her the most age-appropriate anatomical description of the birds and the bees that she could muster. When she was finished, she looked at her daughter and she said, "Do you understand?" Her daughter looked a little glazed and nodded and then added, "Wow, Tommy came from Kaiser." How often are we in those awkward moments that we try to address by telling people what we think they want to hear rather than asking what it is they need to know? We show up with assumptions and goodwill, or sometimes we don't show up because we don't know what to say. But I guarantee you, you usually have more to offer than you think. When my late husband was in the hospital, the elevator was the place where I took off the day's mental mantle, picked up my virtual pom-poms, and went into his room to meet him wherever he was. Some days he was angry that his body was not in his control. Other times he was quite pensive. Often he just wanted to talk and hear about my day, trying to keep to some sense of normalcy. I was his cheerleader, his advocate, his love, his confidant, his sister friend. I had the hard conversations with him, with the doctors, and with his family. But when providers found out I was a therapist and a medical social worker, they commented how lucky he was, but they didn't ask me how I was. They did not acknowledge my humanness, my fear, my grieving. I was so grateful for all the love that surrounded him and truly grateful for all the conversations that we had, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the downright scary. He was a very popular man among family and friends, but I felt so blessed when he told me I was his peace. I was willing to listen, to hear, to sit with his fears, to go where many did not want to go, even to fuss at him when everyone else was treading lightly. I had been working with people living with HIV and substance abuse for years, emotionally disturbed children before that. I was not new to being a witness to life-altering illness, but this was the first time it was happening in my home. I truly appreciated when people brought over food, or took our then 6-year-old out for the evening, or for a day in the park, or when my sister came from Los Angeles to hang out with her brother-in-law while I could go to Calistoga for a night away. Friends and family volunteered for a schedule of weekly caregiving. This became our new normal, and it served us well. After he died, I asked God to let me become the social worker I wished I had had. Eventually, hearing about palliative care, this specialty in medicine that helps the big diagnoses and the even bigger questions, what does this mean? What's next? What does this journey look like? It would be a few years before we actually started the service at my hospital, but I was there, and I knew I wanted to bring it to patients and to their caregivers. When I got back into the flow of work, one of my favorite patients was in the hospital. I visited him just about every day. I could see he was full of unrest, and I just wanted to know how I could help bring him some peace. One day he said to me, "You know my family." To which I responded, "Ooh-wee, yes I do." They put the D in drama. He asked if I could help him get his affairs in order. I called in the legal troops. They got his will straight. We held a family meeting at the bedside, and I winked at him as he told them, "Now this is what I want to happen." When he died 2 days later, he was at peace with his God, his first wife, his second wife, and many children. But most of all, he was at peace with himself. You will find often when people have the chance to talk about what they need, they not only appreciate it, but they jump at the opportunity. Please don't assume things are being taken care of, because often they are not. You can be the resource. During a different conversation with a client, He told me quite frankly, I know why I have HIV. He went on to tell me it was because he had given his parents hell when he was younger, and this was punishment from God. This was his firm belief, and I didn't know where to go with that. You see, in graduate school and in my subsequent training, we were told not to go there when it came to spirituality and religion. Ours was to be a neutral stance, and faith was left to the spiritual counselors. Then I went to the AIDS conference in San Francisco one year. They offered a discussion on HIV and faith. The room was meant to hold 200, but almost 300 of us came. While we had been taught not to discuss our faith, not to discuss faith with clients, we also recognized that in this work, it was negligent not to allow room for people to discuss their beliefs about who they were, about their illness, about their mortality. In subsequent conversations with this gentleman, what I offered was not a religious rebuttal, but an openness to listen with respect, believing, as our first principle states, in his inherent worth and dignity. When you find yourself in the presence of someone who is deep in their fear and their anger and their pain, a simple witness can be a powerful tool. When nurses ask, "What can I do?" I am reminded of the woman who came to the hospital with cancer rapidly spreading through her body. She was shocked when the doctors told her the extent of her illness. She said that simply couldn't be because she had turned her life over to God and had lived by the Word and had gone deep into her faith. She simply knew she would be healed. She lived alone, and her only child was in another country. At first, she would not allow me to call her because she said, "I don't want her making the long trip for nothing." And she did not want God to think her unfaithful, that she was doubting. I asked if I could find a minister to come and do prayer and conversation. She agreed, and eventually she gave me permission to call her daughter and tell her what the doctors were saying, even though she still didn't agree. Her daughter came and was able to be with her for 3 days before she died. Later, her daughter told me how amazed she was that her mother, a woman with nothing, on public insurance, was surrounded by such love and care at the end of her life. The heroes of this story are the nurses who kept the music playing in her room all night, even while she slept. They answered her daughter's questions about what was happening to her mother in a way I never could. And this was on the medical floor. These conversations happened daily in the intensive care unit and on the surgical floor. The day Sydney died, it was a nurse who told me to go home and get my daughter and bring her to the hospital. He nodded when I asked if this was the day. If not for him, we would not have all been there when he died. Before I worked at the hospital, a colleague called me to say that one of our clients was dying, but she couldn't leave. I asked him, "What can I do?" He told me he was calling anyone who would not think him absolutely crazy, including a few of the nurses on the floor, to ask that we go in and give her the energy to transition. When I got to her room, there was a peace that only nurses could create in that sterile space. We gave her energy, and she left. Contra Costa Regional is a teaching hospital. We have residents come from Travis Air Force Base for 6 weeks rotations in the hospital. I had several palliative care conversations with one of the residents. She told me she wished that they had this training at Travis. When I asked her why, she said she felt that part of being a good doctor was to be able to sit with patients, even in their hardest, most fearful moments. She said she did not see that as a failure of medicine because the patient was facing some challenging treatment or that maybe they could not be cured, but rather this was an opportunity to assure them that all was being done. This was the gift of presence. I love my work because it allows me to listen to the heart of another, and it allows me to connect with spirit. When I look into the face or hold the hand of a loved one, recognize the fear and the anguish, and say, yes, this is hard, and it's scary, and you can move through this. This is my calling. This is my passion. Taking those moments in the elevator or the phone booth or the car or the bus to transition from a place of I have nothing to offer to what can I give? What can you do? Can you make macaroni and cheese? Can you make your friend's favorite cobbler? Can you take the kids to school? When your friend's hair is falling out, can you tell him he has a pretty head? Can you take notes at the doctor's appointment? Can you pick up the laundry from their house on your way home and drop it off on your way out in the morning? I remember calling my sister one day and just screaming into the phone. When I finished, she asked what she could do. I said, "You just did it." Blessed are those who come into my presence. Blessed are those who listen to my truth. Blessed are those who hear my doubts. Blessed are those who see my anger. Blessed are those who sense my pain. Blessed are those who witness my tears. Blessed are those who hold my body. These words are for the caregiver as well as the cared for. To quote the late tennis pro Arthur Ashe, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. Finally, in thinking back to the original story about Janet, when you are stepping into an awkward moment and you're not sure of what to say, you can start with, what have you heard, and what would you like to know? You can be the one to make it so.